Hi, everybody. It's Robyn.
And Karen.
And today we're exploring astrology with Stevie Knispel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're so glad you're here. So Stevie, why don't we start at the very beginning? For someone who has very minimal understanding of astrology, how would you define it?
Really, truly, astrology is the study of the stars and our planets. So on another level, as far as what astrology actually is, it's the degrees of where planets are in the sky, depending on when you were born and currently, and that relationship back and forth. In a practical sense, it's more about a tool to help find meaning and understanding in this lifetime and what we're able to control and what we're not, because some things were fated. And then we also have free will. So the way that we look at these things and these energies that we're experiencing is completely up to us. But really, astrology is like the snapshot of like where planets were in degree in the sky. So
Right. So when people talk about astrology in relation to science and math, that's what you're talking about, right?
yeah, so it really is a scientific mathematical process that you go through in order to create a chart for yourself. What sign is the sun currently in and what degree is it in? What sign is the moon and what degree is that currently in? And how do they speak to each other? And so it's where the planets were by degree in the sky based on like where we are from Earth, right? Like the view is from here. You could look at it from lots of other places, but the actual map is from here on Earth, like where the sun is, where the moon is, where all the planets are. And are they intense placements to each other or are they in harmonious placements to each other? They really matter. But it's basically like that snapshot.
Right. And you can get really precise because you are using longitude and latitude.
Exactly.
And then you're also using time as we look at it. And obviously you have to know what time zone you're in and all of that to calculate that right meaning for that person.
Yep, exactly.
And to that point, like if somebody was to say to you, I was born on the exact same day in the same hospital as Lisa, my neighbor, how come we don't have the exact same horoscopes?
Yeah, so really there's a couple of things there. First of all, it's timing. So like the time changes everything. Like, so say you were born 4, 5, 10 minutes apart from each other, that changes a lot. It changes like where things show up in your life, like the themes in your life would change. So it really is like this thumbprint that's super specific to the time and the date and the where. And even twins, right? Like that comes up a lot. Like, why are twins different? They have similarities, but they're different. Well, first of all, they're different souls that had different past lives and different energies that they came in with. But secondly, they usually were born minutes apart from each other. And those few little moments like really do change a whole birth chart. It's crazy.
I think that's so helpful for people to understand. And what would you say are some of the common misconceptions about astrology?
One of the biggest ones is that it's overgeneralized because all it is sun signs. You know, it's like, oh, you're a Leo, so you're just this. And it's like, no, you are so many other things. I like to think of astrology as your sun sign is the driver of the bus. And, you know, Venus and the moon and Mars and everyone else is in the back of the bus, and they are all different than your sun sign. So they all have needs that need to be met. And basically how they all can play together. It's almost like multiple personalities. We all have these. You could even give them names if you want, as you learn about the different kinds of people that are within you, because you're not just one thing. So I think that's the biggest thing is like astrology is just the sun sign, and it's not true. To that note, like when you do read a horoscope, we need to look at your rising sign, and I think we're going to talk about that later, right?
Yes.
But you really, that's one of the biggest misconceptions is how horoscopes are written. And if it's a good astrologer, they write it based on the rising sign, not the sun sign. So the where of things in the horoscope, it really matters. And if you read it as your sun sign, you might find pieces that are like, oh yeah, that resonates with me, right? But ultimately, when an astrologer is writing it, they're writing it with the rising sign. So we'll definitely talk about how you can figure that out and then read horoscopes now with a new lens of a different sign. It'll really help you. Astrology it's like that thumbprint. It's just so very specific, and it's not just one thing at all.
And I love that we've already established that this is based on math and science, but many people believe that it's magic or that there's some sort of paranormal aspect to it. Do you get that? And do people say that to you?
Yes, 100%. Or even like, I think sometimes people will come into readings with me and think that I'm a medium, or that I can see the future, and people can definitely do that. However, that's not my thing, because astrology is a physical map that I'm looking at and able to talk about different archetypes and gifts and challenges and these things. But it's not me pulling information from somewhere else. Although I definitely tap into my intuition during readings, and that's a whole different conversation. But I think that people do think it's like this really magical, paranormal, freaky, scary thing sometimes. And I even have clients that are a little bit nervous coming into the readings because of it. But yeah, it's not. It's totally this ancient science that was studied over centuries. Because another thing, people are like, oh, astrology is this trend. No. It's like ancient.
Yes, I love what you said. It's an ancient science.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I want to hear a little bit more too about like how you started.
Astrology has always intrigued me. From like a really young age, I was very curious about it. But I grew up in an incredibly small town where we grew up Catholic. And then when I was in high school, I converted to Christianity because that's really all we had. There wasn't any other exposure in my life to anything else. And I just had this like crazy yearning to like attach myself to something much wider than just normal life. And then I actually got cancer when I was 15, and it shook my world. And I feel like it was very, very karmic for it to happen for my family, and like a lot of things changed in my household. But the one thing that really changed for me is like, I have to connect with spirituality. I have to lean on something greater than myself in order to get through this. So that's really what helped. And then I went to college and I moved to Chicago, and my whole world was like, I met all these people that were so different than me and had way different upbringings and different beliefs, and it just like rocked my world. And so like that morphed from like Christianity and being really into that religion into like much more of like, oh, wait, you can actually have a spiritual practice where you're not religious. And how beautiful is that? And so from then it was basically finding your tribe of people and really having these incredible, deep philosophical conversations and studying all different kinds of religion. I traveled to India and my mind was just like totally blown there, just because they're so steeped in a connection with spirituality there that is just so different than Christianity. And that really changed my whole world. And then honestly, like 6 or 7 years ago, I just had this knowing that I had to study astrology. I watched this YouTube video of this woman and I realized she was a teacher, and I just like ran to her and signed up to study with her. And then from then it's been nonstop, because astrology really is one of those things that you could study and learn forever and ever. And it's just ongoing.
So tell us a little bit about the type of astrology that you practice, because I know that there's different kinds.
There's so many. The ones that I gravitated toward first were esoteric astrology, which is basically like the study of the soul, and it's very big picture based. You zoom out, then you're all these things, and how do they talk to each other? And it's more like a basic level of astrology, but it's all, astrology is a spiritual practice, right? It's still the study of the soul, no matter how you look at it. And then I moved towards evolutionary astrology, which focuses very, very much on Pluto and the nodes, the north and south nodes, which is just these points on the moon. So where those 3 things were in the sky have so much to do with your soul's evolution, like your past life self, this life, like what are you bringing into this life and what are you really here to do? So that tells me a lot about your soul's purpose. And then the third type that I practice is shamanic astrology. It's basically the study of planets as our guides. So how you can bring in more sun energy or moon energy or Mars based on what you're trying to call in. How can you create an altar to each planet to honor that planet? And I just find that like that grounding that astrology into like something more physical is really a beautiful, practical way in how to use it in your everyday life, basically.
I've never heard of that, of actually creating an altar to a planet before. That's fascinating.
So for example, especially this year, I've had a lot of clients that have wanted to manifest things in their life. I usually recommend creating a Jupiter altar, and that really is to like call in abundance and expansion. And really it's just like making an altar of the feeling for you of expansion or manifestation. So what makes you feel excited, and what is it that you want to call in, and how can you put that on the altar, right? It's very, very personal, and it's totally to honor the planet and the planet in you, because really they're us. We're all one energy. We have pieces of Jupiter inside of us, just like we have pieces of, we're made of the stars and the moon, and we're made of all of that same stuff. So it's just like honoring that piece in you. Shamanic astrology is looking at the planets as they are our guides. Like they want to help us. Like they can be hard on us.
And when you say guides, I think for people who are listening who don't necessarily totally understand that term,
Yeah.
what Stevie is saying is think of them as living, breathing energy.
Yes. That are here to help you. They want you to grow. They want you to do the things that you came in here to do. And sometimes they shove us. Sometimes we need a little kick in the butt to do the things that we came in here to do, you know? So they do have our best interest at heart, and they are guiding us for sure.
So, we brought this up earlier in our conversation, but what is a natal birth chart? I think that there are a lot of people who don't understand what that is or how you figure that out.
So it's basically a snapshot of where the sun, moon, and all the planets were the moment you were born, and also which constellation was rising at the horizon the minute that you were born, basically. It's a map of that. So for this, you need your exact birth date, the exact time, and the location of where you were born. You can pull up your chart on astro.com. That's a site that I really like because the charts are very clear. And if you know your birth time, then you're able to see your rising based on it.
Most people don't understand or have never even heard of a rising sign, which you were just talking about. How does somebody find their rising sign?
Yeah, absolutely. So the sun is how you shine your light out to the world, and the personality type of yourself. This is where your ego lives, and this is where your normal personality lives. The rising is the constellation that came up at the horizon the moment you were born. That sign, which can be the same as your sun once in a while, but usually it's different. This is really how people see you. It's how, like, almost like a first impression. You're going to give off this energy outwardly, and not in the same way that you're shining the light of your sun. That's just like sort of innate. The rising is how people like take on your energy or how they see you at a first glance. So it's also a huge part of who you are. And then the third piece is your moon, which I never want to forget because it's your internal self. It's your emotional body and your inside needs. So these three players in your chart are the biggest ones, I would say.
That's huge. And so for someone to figure them out, you recommend going to astro.com. And if they plug in that information, will it very clearly say, here's your sun, here's your rising, here's your moon?
If you look at it, the sun is a little circle. And so you'll see the sun. And at the bottom, there's a little graph or a little chart, and it'll say sun equals, and then the sign that it's in. And then the rising is called also the ascendant or the AC. So the AC equals the sign. That will be your rising sign. And it's really it's on the very left side of your chart, and it's what starts the houses.
Cool. And then would the moon also be in there too?
Yep, you would know what the moon is. It would say moon equals and then the sign.
I think that's so important for people. It really kind of helps you see that there's so many more dimensions to you than just your sun sign.
That was eye-opening, I know, for me. I honestly didn't know that existed. Having this knowledge, how does it help somebody really figure out why they're here in this lifetime?
Yeah, so the more you break down each planet and what sign it's in, it really tells you all the different personalities that are inside of yourself. How do you allow them to have their needs met? We are all such complex beings. So really, astrology helps us understand who we are and like what we're here to do. I also think that on a daily basis, looking at the moon signs and the archetypes and knowing what your moon is going to really help you figure out, when do I feel my best and how can I use it? For example, this is more complex, but when you have a sign in the 12th house, and when you pull up your chart, you'll see what sign rules your 12th house. It's just a little icon. When the moon is in that sign, you're going to be tired. Like, you're going to want to meet more solitude. You'd be good at meditating and like going internal. And so paying attention to how you feel each time things shift in your chart will really help. And it really is this big picture look at how everything works together, where your challenges and gifts are, and what your soul is here to do. What does it want to do? How can it like open up and really become enlightened and alive? That's really what astrology, I think, is best at.
Hey, Stevie, do you think that people come in planning on being born at a specific time and place? I mean, is their astrological chart almost like a little plan that,
like a blueprint?
Yeah.
It really, really is. I think that especially when you study evolutionary astrology, it's so focused on the soul contract. Before you came, you had this list of things that you wanted to accomplish. And it's really like what do you want to go to school for here in this life?
And by the way, you don't necessarily even mean like real school. Like you're thinking of like
totally
school life,
no, like
right?
what are you here to learn? Yeah, in the school of life, what are you here to learn? Like, what are you here to do? Are you here to really learn so much from your marriage? Are you here to work really hard and help save humanity? There's always multiple things we're here to do, but there are a few markers that tell you what makes you come alive. What is that? What is that thing? And I think that this is where that fate comes in. Like, this is predetermined based on you, what you chose.
Well, and I love for people to hear that this is a resource, right? It's not necessarily the answer to everything, but it really
100%.
It can give you this outline, kind of who you are and why you're here.
And I really think too, like it's can be such a validation for people. Like, as you get to know your chart and you start to understand these parts of yourself and you give yourself permission to just be that, because that's what you are. And then as you get deeper into your practice of what am I feeling and what is my gut saying, you can be validated, because then we'll talk and I will say to somebody like, well, clearly right now it's a time where you're asked to be very disciplined with your money. And they'll say, holy crap, yes, I've been feeling so much of this lately. And then you can start trusting yourself. It's just a tool. It's not, like you said, it is not the answer to everything, because you can take things in so many different ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, it helps you look at the bigger picture. And I know for some people, they go through like a kind of a chunk of time where they're feeling really down. And if they actually consulted their chart, they might see that you planned this. I think it's hard for people to always accept that, but there are moments in our lives, and those moments could be years, where we are there to learn something that is harder. It feels harder.
Yep. And that's usually like an asking to be like something to shed and a transformation to happen in order for you then to go to school for something else, right? To learn something else. Like, we have these different phases in our life, and astrology really tells us what phase of life that we're in too, which is really helpful. And sometimes they're dark, because you're supposed to exfoliate crap out of your life during that time, let go of stuff. Yeah.
Stevie, we keep hearing a lot about Mercury and retrograde and new moons and full moons and all the influence that has on our day-to-day. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So they definitely impact us. It's going to affect you in different ways depending on your astrological makeup, right? If you were born during a new moon, you might feel like, oh, when a new moon comes around, like, oh, I feel so good, or if you're born during a full moon, you might feel the same way. It just depends on the person. But new moons ultimately are such a good time to like start a new intention. It's the new lunar cycle, and it's this new energy that we can tap into, start to manifest on like a monthly basis. So it's like a short-term manifestation project. That's basically what I like to do during new moon. So a great time to call in something new, journal, meditate on it, spend time with your altar. It's more internal energy. It's the moon, it's dark. So we're asked to go inward and look at ourselves, listen to our dreams during this time. But overall, full moons let go and new moons call in. And Mercury retrograde is 3 times a year usually. And basically, Mercury is the planet of communication, like how we speak to each other, how we learn, how we write. It's all things words. So this is from where the Earth is. Mercury's speeds start to slow down based on where we are. And it's just the orbit that it's in, right? So the speeds start to slow down in the planet of communication, words, technology as well. And then it starts to go backwards, just from our point of view. So the planet that's always fast and the communication is on and we are able to speak clearly and write and read and just be like mentally on, this planet slows way down. And so, it definitely messes things up. People fear it because it's just like one of those astrological fear tactics. Basically, technology breaks down. The internet doesn't work very well because the speed isn't at its optimal level. It's slower. Those things are going to go first. Like your TV might break during that time, or your car. How I like to look at it is it's a redo. So it's like a revisit or a redo of something in your life. So if you look at your chart and you'll see the little Mercury symbol, you look at when it's retrograde, what sign is it in, right? So this is the area of your life that it's going to affect you. And that can get really complex with like the house system and all that. But basically, in one area of your life during a Mercury retrograde, you are asked to redo something and revisit something. So say it's in the house of romance, and then an old lover comes in, and you're like, what the heck? Where did you come from? Well, you're supposed to like go back and revisit that relationship and then move on from there. So it just depends on like where the Mercury retrograde is in your chart or where it's going to show up. And there's other factors there too that like make it so personal. Were you born during a Mercury retrograde? Because then you might feel like, oh my gosh, my mind works amazing right now. And you might feel really good. But I think it's because technology breaks down, and that's why people freak out so much. And it's also a time where people, when they communicate to each other, there's misunderstandings for sure, because we're just not working at our mental optimal levels.
So in addition to the communication breakdown with Mercury in retrograde, would you also say people should be a little bit more wary of signing certain documents or contracts?
Yeah, if you do happen to be in a period of time, like if your house is selling or something during that time and you can't help it, which mine actually did last year during a Mercury retrograde, you just have to be more careful, like really paying attention to what the words say and going over it a few more times than you normally would have, because miscommunication can happen, and that's definitely with contracts as well. It's not always the case, but it's just something to be aware of.
And one other thing that I know I had read about with Mercury in retrograde is that if something comes up that you had started a long time ago, that's actually a good thing. Let's say a job offer or selling your house. Like,
Yes.
But let's say you had started it months prior and it comes
Yep.
to fruition around that time.
Yep.
You're okay, right?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Don't fear it.
Exactly.
I think that's what you're saying about everything, right? Like these are just guideposts.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be every single day you checking your chart to see what you should and shouldn't do.
And we can also share at another time some of what you gave us really for our blueprints, these overall themes that we should know about ourselves, and which is why we want to introduce everybody to you, because you've been so incredible at translating who we are through our charts.
One of the questions I think we did have, is there any general theme for 2020 that everybody who's listening now can relate to or integrate into their lives?
Yeah. So yes, 2020 is hard. It's like an evolutionary shift that's happening. This is the beginning of like our kids, even our kids' kids and their kids are going to really benefit from what we're doing. But this is like way down the line. So the current infrastructures and systems are being asked to crumble and die. So this is the breaking down of those structures and systems that don't serve us anymore, especially when it comes to politics, economics. We have a shakeup going on when it comes to our earth. Like, so more flooding this year, more natural disaster because of how we've abused her. So it really is like a breaking down in order to build up new foundations and new structures. But it's slow. It's like over decades of time. And while we're all being asked to shed something ourselves, we really are doing it as a whole, as a collective. And we've stepped into the Age of Aquarius, which is the age of technology and communication and innovation and science. And like, it's going to help us survive as a human race, honestly, and also keep us connected to like, what does our humanity need? So what we are being asked to do is to take action with all this Capricorn earth energy. We're asked to take action, and what do we stand for? And like actually do something about it. Standing up for what you believe in is really important. We're going to see more of this as the year goes on. And just really, what can you do in your life? This is like daily thing. What are those things in order for you to help yourself and help everyone around us?
And then stand up for things on this larger scale. Where can you make a difference?
The Age of Aquarius is really accepting of open ideas and new ways of thinking. It's innovative. It like wants to bring in spirituality. We're really opening our eyes as a humanity. Everyone's like waking up to this like connection to the other side, or connection to something greater than themselves. So that's amazing. But it's painful in the process of any time you're breaking something down.
I believe there's probably no coincidence that we're creating this platform for people and trying to seek and find ways for people to look at their lives differently, right? That we come in here for a bigger purpose. I think what we talked about today, that so much of it's planned before we get here. That we have these lessons to learn. And I know it's really asking people to be open to looking at their lives in a different way than they have been. The goal is to awaken people to what they can't see. And it's, again, I don't think we're saying anything is the answer, but you have all these resources you probably didn't know about. And so astrology is one of them.
Yeah.
Really, one of the things that I know Karen and I have experienced, and I believe you've experienced this as well, is when you start to put these different modalities together, right? So whether you have an intuitive reading or you have an astrological reading or you have a shamanic experience, you start to hear all of the same themes for you come up.
Yep.
And you can't question that there is something else going on that you're supposed to hear. And I think that's the goal, is for people to hear about these and then experience them on their own.
Yeah.
So that they themselves can see that there is so much more going on around them.
Yeah. And they're part of it, right? Like
that they're part of it. Correct.
They're not a victim of it. 100%.
Correct.
Yep.
Right. And that there's purpose to it all.
Exactly.
And so what you're bringing to the table is just showing us that here's one tool where we can get some of those clues, right? To who we are, why we feel the way we do.
Well, and that we're all here at this time on this planet for a specific reason, right?
So well said.
Right? Like that is the case. And so we're here to help awaken, help the planet.
We chose this time.
We chose this. Yes. It was a mutual agreement. All of us.
Yes.
And even in the darkest times.
Yes.
That there's a reason we're going through that dark time right now.
I think people remember somewhere that know these tools already, or they've used them in past lives. And so it's just sort of rekindling that.
Exactly. It's a remembering. Totally.
Yeah.
I love that. It's a remembering. I think that's the perfect way to end today's episode, because I feel like there's so much more to learn about astrology, but what you've given everybody listening today is really a good basic understanding, as well as giving everybody a couple of things to think about, right? So their rising sign and their moon sign, they need to start to understand what those are in addition to their sun sign.
Yeah.
And then also that outlook that you gave us all for 2020 on a bigger level, I think that's going to help people look at this year differently. So thank you, Stevie. Is there anything else that you'd want to say?
I'm just so grateful for you both and the work that you're doing in the world. And like, I'm so grateful to be a part of it. And thank you so much.
We're so grateful for you. So thank you.
We will have Stevie's website and all that information on Robyn's Seeking with Robyn website.
Yes, we'll have everything on seekingwithrobyn.com, or you can visit us at Seeking with Robyn on social. Nice. So thank you so much.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, Stevie.
Bye.
Bye.